Thank you. As usual, I'm following the most eloquent speaker. Happens to me on a fairly regular basis. Okay. So I am your last speaker. I'm sure those of you on your feet are very glad to hear. So I'm the one who actually went into the business. What's it like to be the repository of somebody's professional dreams? You know, hey, no pressure. It's not like it was important to him or anything. No, but seriously, Dad took every opportunity whenever possible to try and encourage his children, his 2 elder granddaughters, and anybody else who would listen to enter the profession. He would go off and buy textbooks and drafting supplies, and he would make his pitch, and you could see him building up to it. He loved doing that. There's actually only 2 of us that I know who were ever to fall for it. Myself and our neighbor across the street, Angus, my younger brother's very, very good friend, Chris Pemberton, who is now a principal in a firm in the U.S., who would come and check in with his mentor. So, having been in that professional milieu, I'm eternally grateful, because as his daughter and as his employee for 23 years, and in the last few years as his friendly competitor, I got to see what his life was like from the inside professionally. And during that time, I learned many, many invaluable lessons. He would be very annoyed to learn that most of them was what not to do. Number 1, don't let work consume your every working moment, because architecture will do that. Number 2, don't allow your architectural ego to think that you are the stellar businessman as well as a stellar architect. Don't let your inherent shyness stop you from claiming good work that's your own, because many others will step up and claim it if you don't. So I'm not saying that I've learned all these lessons well. As my husband and daughter will attest, I have definitely inherited his workaholic tendencies. And I'm sorry, guys, wherever you are. But he gave me a really wonderful piece of advice one time, and I've never forgotten it, because he said, listen, this work is really, really hard. Something will always go wrong, and inevitably it always does. So don't die 1,000 deaths. Just take it on. And it's the way that you treat those challenges and how you deal with them that makes you the professional. So I'm eternally grateful to him for that lesson. That was the professional side. And on a personal note, I'd just like to talk about the Cornish Road dining room table. Any of you who are ever in the house know the table, know the dining room. As we spoke about, Karen helped build the dining room table. My mother did 12 beautiful painted panels. Their idea was, okay, the ceiling's falling down. What do you do? Drywall or Hampton Court? Let's go Hampton Court. Okay. But the table is great. The table came from a branch of the Royal Bank in Ottawa, and his idea was, all right, what's a really good surface? Borco. If you've never actually worked in architecture before 1990, you might not know what Borco is. Borco is a really, really unattractive green soft plastic which goes on drafting boards. So imagine this beautiful big wood table with drawers of which we would stuff the food that we didn't want. And the table surface is covered in green plastic. But the table was important because everything happened at that table. Everything was discussed of any kind of import. Dressmaking went on. Nicola probably made the most amazing creations possible there. Angus built models and put out trains. And all of my mother's prints were pulled at that table. And everybody who ever was welcomed into our home inevitably ended up at that table and sat there. And it was also the last place that he sat on Christmas Day, enjoying brunch, before he went to the hospital. So I think the Christmas table is pretty cool. And then I wanted to take this opportunity to read a message from Will Alsop, who unfortunately could not be with us today, but was a friend. It's titled Rod. Rod first came to my attention across the dinner table at Le Select Bistro when the restaurant was still on Queen Street in 1999. I had just finished the interview for OCAD, and we and others met to dissect the process and ordeal we had just been dragged through. My first impressions were of a friendly man with huge energy for his age, because he was no spring chicken even then. He was a former smoker and no stranger to red wine. For this reason, he was my friend, in addition to all of his other qualities. He was cheeky, opinionated, and full of anecdotes, and in fact, on a one-on-one conversation, I did not have to say anything with the exception of the odd grunt of approval and a chuckle or two in the appropriate place. He was a perfect chum. He talked of the war, the LCC, where he worked for a while, as well as occasionally architecture. I adored listening. I must admit that the explanation of the sliding and nesting workings of Skydome did become a little wearing after 4 or 5 times, but he was rightly proud of it, and I was always happy to absorb the story. It was odd that I often prompted him as he related this mechanism, as I think eventually I knew it better than him. On that first meeting, he told me that architecture was 90% performing art, and as he was trying to reassure me about the possible strategies of dealing with the project interview we had just come from. He would have won many an Oscar. I will miss the old bugger, and I wish I could be there with you today to raise a glass. He taught me a lot, and he will remain in my memory until I join him wherever he is. Will also. In closing, I'd like to say a few thank yous on behalf of my sister Karen, Nicola, and my brother Angus. First and foremost, to our families. Chris, Jeff, and Julie, this has been equally hard on all of you, and honestly, we could never have done this without you. Vicky, Sam, Emmanuel, and Raphael, enough said. To our extended families in Europe and the US, this is the immigrant experience that something always happens over there. So we wish that you could be with us, but we're hoping that you're going to be able to watch this on YouTube and experience it. To all of Dad's friends, neighbors, colleagues, and even acquaintances, if we ever doubted that Dad had made an impression, we certainly don't now. After the last 4 weeks, the amount of messages and amazing things that we've received has been incredible. To Sarah and the entire OCAD family for making this event possible and to allow it to have a life afterwards. We want to stay in the community as benefactors, and we really look forward to meeting the first and hopefully many more recipients of the Enid and Rod Memorial Scholarship in printmaking. And lastly, by way of introduction, I'd like to thank an incredible group of Dad and our friends who generously offered to give of their not insignificant professional talent to make a film that you will now see. Thank you.